everybody. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws podcast with East Forest. I'm East Forest, and I'm coming to you today with a conversation with Random Rab. Mr. Rab. He's someone that I've crossed paths with over the years, just kind of here and there, and always enjoyed seeing his work, but I never really got a chance to sit down with the guy and ask him, well, just listen and ask questions. This is like the thing I love about this podcast, is that I get to do that with so many people and then just get to know them. And that's what I got to do with Rab. So I think you'll enjoy the conversation. We really got to get into music for those music heads out there, but just also the process of creation and what this whole world is like of DJs and consciousness music and just his own process, creative process. So we'll get right into that. I'm about to hit the road to be on tour. So I don't know when you're listening to this, but in a couple days, I'm going to be heading out to the East Coast and Chicago. I just want to let you know quickly, I think there's 7 or so dates. It'll be Pennsylvania on April 10th and over to New Jersey the day after, New York City on April 13th, Saturday, Westport, Massachusetts, upstate New York, sort of in the Catskills, and then heading all the way up to Ithaca on the 18th, and then I bounce out to Chicago. So that's the little run coming up. I'm particularly excited about the New York City date because that's with my buddy Morning Altars, who you know from this podcast. But what's so exciting is that we did this once before in Portland at the old church, where he makes a live altar in the space. So he's building it in response to the music, and I'm playing the music in response to him. And because this is an East Forest ceremony event, what is even better is you guys will be joining in on a group ritual to use that altar and use the music and our own ceremony together to amplify that event, to be a spring ritual and to plant some seeds in your consciousness, in your unconscious, in your heart, and for the planet. So do check that one out. New York City at Hub 17. That's at 17th Street and 5th Avenue, right there in the middle of downtown Manhattan on April 13th. So that's all at eastforest.org/tour. And after that, we'll get into a West Coast thing in June. Yeah, stuff's being added all the time, so always check it out. I also want to wish a happy birthday to our dear friend Ram Dass. He turned 88 years old just a bit ago, and that's it. I just want to say happy birthday. He's here we are in the middle of this process of releasing the Ram Dass project, and it's been nothing short of magical. I am wrapping up the final featured artists and the final mixing, and we're getting prepared to share more of that with you with chapters 3 and 4 coming up this summer. So I hope you're enjoying chapter 2, which came out recently, and thank you for sharing what you feel about it with your friends and what comes up for you emotionally and just how you're using it as a tool and just what you think about it on social media. Because I get to see that, but more importantly, it really helps spread the message about this work and these new teachings by Ram Dass. So thanks for sharing it. I appreciate it. You can always reach out here at info@eastforest.org if you'd like to send me a message or if you have any questions. Sometimes I get to read those on the air. And thank you for giving the podcast a review. Give it 5 stars. Just scroll down there. It's really super easy, and you can hit write a review and just type in a few sentences. All that stuff makes a big difference in sort of the aggregators that post the podcast, and just for other people who, when they find a podcast like this, whether they want to give it a shot and give it a listen, because I think a lot of the people who are coming on this, like Random Rab today, it helps you just get a glimpse into other people's lives, creative lives, other forms of thought, and we can pick up new ways of being about just living wisely and well. So thank you so much for doing that. Otherwise, I've just been home for, it's been about a week since being in Texas. Thank you for everyone who came out to the gigs in Austin and Dallas. That was really fun. We had to get up every day at 6 a.m. I don't know how it worked out that way. It was like the first day for the flight, the next day to drive down to Austin, and the next day for a flight again. So that just didn't feel very rock and roll, but kind of felt tired after that. But one thing I've been wanted to share with you that I've been getting into since being back is my meditation game. And I use the word game somewhat unconsciously and consciously because it's kind of a game with my mind in a sense, right? And what I'm excited about with it is that I'm not diving in some full force way that feels overwhelming. It's more just recognizing the value and the pleasure of sitting, even for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it wants to be. And just recognizing that there's always going to be that resistance. It's really a lot like the creative process when I need to rehearse or write something or anything like that. There's always a lot of resistance. I'm not really sure why. It just seems to have something to do with the nature of creativity typically. And it's something similar with meditation where, it's hard to just do it. But once you do it, it's quite pleasurable beyond the fact that you usually feel better. And it has these sort of building effects, over time. And so it's just sort of encouraging you to experiment with your own meditation. And I've released, I think last week, there was a meditation for sleep, but I've got a few other free meditations in this podcast, and they can be a great way of a doorway inside and a way to shake it up. Because, I need to do things, I'd like to do stuff every day that is about nourishing the soul and just about just being here now. And I think what's important for me is recognizing that it doesn't always have to be the same thing. I don't have to meditate every day in the same way for the same amount of time at the same time. It's helpful to realize you can shake it up. You can have fun with it, be creative. It could be through today, that might be through going on a walk. That's perhaps I don't listen to music, so I can just be present and be contemplative. Or perhaps it's a form of exercise, or it's through a yoga class. Or then I also have a little sitting meditation. So there's a lot of different ways you can skin the cat, as it were. That's a very strange phrase, but you know what I mean. Be creative. Be creative with just carving out time to say, hey, I'm just gonna be me for a second, because being you is kind of what we're here to do. Alrighty, let's get into this conversation with Random Rab. Hope you enjoy it. All right. Thanks, man. So what were you saying?
I was just saying that I'm a huge fan of your music, and it's so cool that you reached out to me because I discovered you kind of, randomly on Spotify, and I have you on a couple of my playlists. And so it was cool when you reached out. It took me a second to make the connection. I was like, oh yeah, I have this music already. I love it. So it's
awesome.
Super cool.
Yeah, well, we have lots of mutual friends, and we've crossed paths a bit in the past. And because when Charles Shaw was in Portland for a while, that was years ago, but he and I were hanging out a bit. And, I know Android, and not as well as you, but I've stopped by his home a few times and connected. Michael Robinson's friends with him, and the whole Evolver world, and musicians I know you've worked with that I know, and so forth and so on. So,
well, awesome. We're one family. It's about time we connected then.
There you go. Yeah. Where are you still in Ashland, or where are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in Ashland for the most part. And then I spend a fair amount of time in Boulder, Colorado. And then the rest of the time on the road, which is probably where I spend most of my time, honestly.
And how much time are you on the road these days?
I'm doing like 2 tours a year at the, spring and fall. And then the summertime is like festival season. So it's kind of touch and go for the whole summer. So I'd say I'm on the road at least half the time these days.
Wow.
I don't really pay rent anywhere right now. So I'm kind of doing the whole van life thing. And then I have a music studio here in Ashland. So it's just I feel like I'm always on the road in a way.
Oh shit. So what kind of situation you got with your van?
Well, I'm actually working on it right now. I've been living, I have basically a brand new Sprinter, and I'm converting it right now.
The tall one you can stand up in?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I had an older one that I had been using for a 2003 model for years and years, but I finally decided to get a new one. So I'm so much happier. But now I'm in it's a whole world trying to do the whole proper van conversion. And so I've been listening to van conversion podcasts. I've been watching YouTube videos nonstop. And
I went down that rabbit hole myself a couple years ago thinking about it. Yeah. I looked into all the installation ideas people had and sailboat toilets. And my friend has a sailboat toilet in a tiny house he built, and he says it's incredible.
Like he only has, I'm going to write that down.
Oh yeah, he's like sailboats they have some of the best stuff for tiny houses and probably vans too. And the toilet he had, this composting toilet, was so high tech. He says it never smelled, and he only had to mess with it like every couple months. And whatever came out of it was like Martian dried up poop. It was like it was just like I don't understand how that works, to be honest. But he's been using it for years now in his tiny house.
Well, I will say that one thing I've learned about doing this whole conversion thing is that you get a very intimate understanding of what it means to be a human and all of the little comforts and needs and excretions, and it's all crammed into a tiny space. And so trying to understand how to put a human in a box and make it work has been really interesting, because I'm learning a lot about myself and about what we are as animals and our little needs that we have.
Yeah. Are you going to go the sort of stealth route where people might not be too sure if it's a RV
it's
type
totally
situation?
Stealth. Yeah, exactly. That's what I learned with my last vehicle. I used to have my Random Rab logo decals on my old van. Yeah. And I would be at festivals or parked in front of shows, and people would just come up and knock on my van all the time and, hey, Rab, and I love seeing people, but there's a time and a place for it. So once I took my logos off, and once I took my logos off and then it looks like a delivery vehicle, I realized that's so much better, and I can camp anywhere, on any street in any parking lot, and it just looks like I'm, delivering chickens or something. Mm-hmm. So, that's something that I've really think is important, because a lot of these sprinters are so decked out that, no matter, especially as a musician, you're always, I'll be in downtown New York, or I'll be in Chicago, or we're at some major city in a potentially sketchy neighborhood or something. Mm-hmm. And I don't want it to look like, it's a big expensive camper van. I want it to look like I'm there to work. So, in that way, it's pretty functional.
Yeah. So do you tend to tour alone, or do you have someone driving with you?
Yeah, well, right now I'm touring with my girlfriend, who's actually come on as my tour manager, and her name is Michelle, and also she helps me sell merch. And so we've been doing the last couple tours together, just the two of us, and she's actually picked up quite a bit of the tech and now is like my lighting tech as well. Oh. And so it's a multifaceted thing we have going on. And she also is a massage therapist and acupuncturist, so she keeps me in line and helps out with everything. It's pretty awesome. Kind of for the first time, I feel like I'm home on the road, because I have my partner with me, and it doesn't feel like tour life is somehow completely separated from my quote unquote real life.
Is she a chef?
She is an awesome cook too. Yeah. So it's a complete package. Yeah.
And what are you doing about, you're like creating music? Are you just doing it on mostly headphones, or are you doing it with any kind of monitor setup? You drop into spaces just for critical mixing, or?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little tricky, because my home studio that I have here in Ashland has all the toys, all the hookups. Everything is so dialed here that I feel the most creative here. And this is where I get the bulk of my work done. It's kind of hard on the road. I kind of dink around a little bit, and occasionally we'll get an Airbnb and set up my monitors and do that kind of thing. It's a little, I feel like when I'm actually like show days and days off are quite often not the best time for me to create music. Sometimes I'll work on sample packs and that kind of thing, or more kind of technical little doodads that I may use later in a larger composition, or sit around the campfire and play guitar. But for the most part, had a hard time really being super productive on the road. However, with my new van setup, I am building a small studio in there with monitors and power and some synths and stuff that are going to be permanently mounted in the van. And I'm hoping that will give me the opportunity to be a little bit more creative on the road. Because one of the biggest problems often is just pulling out the laptop, getting the headphones, the sound card, everything all ready. And by the time that happens, maybe you have to go or have dinner or whatever. And so you don't often have the time or the convenience, or it can feel inconvenient. And I don't think that's very conducive to a creative space in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know. The road's interesting. Like, I feel like everything goes out the window as far as normal routines, and you have to have you really have to fight to have any just sort of new routines of any kind in that space. I got a buddy who the same guy in the tiny house, Stephen Camo. He's a friend of mine who helped build the studio that we're using down in southern Utah. Actually, wait a minute, you've been there. Do you remember the Boulder Mountain Guest Ranch? You played a gig there in like an underground sort of like root cellar with a couple years ago. You met Ron Johnson.
Oh, of course. Yes. I love that spot.
That place. That's where I live, down there.
Oh, you live there on that property?
Well, in that town. Now, like out the south wall of that room you were in, we built a music studio. And it's awesome. I know Ron would love to have you back anytime. So if you're cruising around and you wanted to do some mixing or writing or whatever, it's a wonderful place for that. But
that is so cool. That is one of the coolest properties I've ever seen. And
well, now it's even cooler.
Yeah,
we have an API board and barefoot monitors and a wonderfully treated room and some nice toys. So it's pretty great.
That's that. I'm so there. I can't wait.
Yeah. So, but Steve-O had a tiny house there when his job was building, project management of things like that. And he had these headphones that he was using just to do his basic writing. Really fancy open headphones. I think they're like $1,500 headphones. And then I have a pair of in-ears that I use for performance, but I also use them in the studio too, and that's been pretty useful. I can get pretty close on those.
Yeah, I found that the open back headphones are really nice they reduce fatigue over the long term. And I do think at some point I'd like to invest in something like that. Because right now I just use like my Bose noise canceling headphones, which are pretty nice because it cuts out especially on airplanes and stuff, it cuts out all the extraneous noise. And also I think it kind of closely approximates what, a normal listener would hear. So it can be effective in that way. But yeah, I would someday invest in some really nice open backs would be great. I do find though, however, that what I do accomplish on the road is writing lyrics and poetry and just different things like that. I find that being in new spaces often inspires me conceptually rather than structurally, I guess. So that's one of the cool things about being on the road, I find, is just finding those places and times when you can sit down with a notebook and sketch out some ideas or work on content in that way.
So your new record, it's got a lot more lyrics, right? And vocals?
Yeah, it does. And I also tried to focus on, I guess, song-based songs, if that makes sense.
What does that mean to you?
Explain to me, that means like slightly shorter. So within like the 4 to 5 minute range, rather than some of my songs in the past, which would 7 to 9 minutes sometimes. And also structurally more more structured and less drifting psychedelic.
Yep.
And it wasn't necessarily something that I intended to do. It was just something that I realized that's what I was doing, and decided to, when I was kind of getting to the end of the album, to really make that concrete. So I had a bunch of songs that were 9 minutes long that were great, but I decided that they didn't fit on this particular album, which was going to be more based around lyrics and song-based material.
Yeah. And how's it going? Like, have you started performing that live yet with all the lyrics and singing?
Yeah, and so nowadays with my live set, I'm playing guitar and singing with pretty much every track. Whereas in the past, the last year when I went on tour, I had all my little synths and drum machines and samplers and stuff. And I realized on that tour that just only 5 to 10% of the people in the audience even knew what exactly I was doing. That was maybe different than just standing there with an iPod. So it just, even though I'm like, this is my favorite Electron analog 4 synth knob right here. And they look at me and they're like, whatever, dude, you're just standing
nice,
there turning
bro.
it up.
Yeah. Turn it up.
Yep. And that gear is so fragile, and I felt separated from the audience because, when you're looking down at a knob, it can kind of pull you away. So the guitar is an amazing instrument. And I think it's one of the reasons that it's become such an iconic instrument in live music for so long, is because it's exposed and open and people can see it. And it has kind of a sexiness just in its shape already. And it's kind of, I don't want to say the word prop, but it gives you a thing to kind of put your energy into while simultaneously producing a sound that goes out into the audience. So I've been singing and playing guitar and simultaneously mixing and controlling things. And I have a few synths and stuff. And yes, I would say that it's been awesome. The last tour was the first tour in a long time where I personally felt really connected to the audience the entire set, rather than going into my head and losing touch with that connection. It reminds me a lot of when I used to be in a rock band in high school and in college without the band. So it's been exciting for me. I feel inspired again to play live in a way that I didn't lose, but had sort of become a little numb to. And also there's something about taking chances and being exposed and taking risks that keeps it interesting for me, and I think for the audience as well. Because when you're constantly performing either on an instrument or singing, you really have to be on point. And if you make a mistake, everybody hears it. And especially
it's alive. Yeah. It's a live thing.
Especially with all the effects, the reverb delay. If I hit a wrong note, you hear it for like 30 seconds, and I have to go, ooh, every bounce,
Yeah, you're hitting something really important about the guitar and the visual element. Like it's more theatrical. And those elements, the audience can connect the dots as far as like the music being made in front of them. That is true with people who play violin and strings and like Kishi Bashi or Zoe Keating or whoever. You see it right there in front of you, and especially when they're looping, it's like you kind of understand. And I know for myself with the keyboard and looping pedals and stuff, and lots of like knobs I'm turning. I can't tell you how many times I've played a whole set totally live and someone comes up and they're like, bro, that was a sweet DJ set. And and part of me is like, I guess it doesn't matter, to them, because maybe they don't even know what that means. But I'm always, of course, thinking, how do I connect the dots? So I know why I'm doing it that way. It's not just an ethos. It's like, it's more flexible. And I feel like, I'm able to change things and respond in the moment and play music, which is more challenging, but it's more satisfying. And I think you're hitting on something there that will actually help the show, that people will enjoy it more, because guitar is like, you can strap it on and walk around too.
Yeah, and like you said, it's like having all the doing it live, like live PA, live electronic style, does give you the ability to create magic and do something different every time, and it's a very powerful form of art. But there is something really interesting about when it's relatable, I've found, because pretty much everybody's played a guitar or tried to play a guitar or can play guitar. So there's that accessibility. I think like people are like, oh, I get that. I see that. I understand. And with the voice as well. And so I think it kind of makes you seem more like human rather than some space alien that's controlling this spaceship that kind of just doesn't make sense, even to people who make, even me, who's someone who works with all this gear. I don't actually know what oftentimes electronic producers are actually doing up there. I'm like, I know they're turning a knob.
There's no accountability. I mean, you can't say for sure if it's really what's happening. You can't know for sure.
Well, I saw an artist, and I'm not going to mention their name, but they were up there, banging around on some electronic stuff. And then I could tell that something broke, and they had to stop and fix it. But the show went on and there was no change in sound. It just like everything just kept going and there was absolutely no difference. So and then they got the machine back online and started playing around with it again. And I couldn't tell what was that. I was like, well, what does that thing even do? I'm like, if I can't tell it's there and you can't tell it's there, what's there's a little mystery happening there. I mean, I don't know if I ever, I'm not trying to discount it because obviously I do it. I play a lot of gear too, but
what kind of gigs are you doing that you're are you slotting this into situations where it is mostly straight DJ music, or are people expecting something from you and this is new, or has it all been smooth?
It's interesting. Well, I find that when it's my show and I'm the headliner and I'm playing a club, I have a lot more freedom to communicate with the audience and go on a journey that has ups and downs and slow and fast and even fully acoustic, and can come out into the audience at sometimes and really make it a journey that is into my music and into the connection that I want to have with the audience. There are times, however, when I'm flanked by two really heavy-hitting DJs, or producers that are basically playing bass music, and it's sort of that's the scene that we are a part of. Is that I'll be up on stage trying to sustain a huge party that is just going off, and maybe it's like New Year's Eve or something, and I can't really. I need to limit the places I go. Otherwise, you lose. Everyone's just confused, basically. So in those circumstances, sometimes I'll just, do a more straightforward DJ of my material. Sometimes play the guitar, a little less vocals, a little less sing-songy, and just try and bang it out. I still enjoy that, and it's super fun. And so I don't feel like I'm selling myself short or selling out or whatever. But you have to, I think, as a producer, especially the longer you do it and the more different situations you're going to be put in, you have to be flexible. And it's not about telling people what to listen to. It's about being a part of it. It's about being, joining the vibe and really celebrating what everyone wants. And it's not just about me and what I want. It's about the vibe of the party and trying to make everyone have a great time and help facilitate an environment where people can just have the best time of their life. And so that sometimes means changing what you do and being able to accommodate that. And it happens a lot. And as a down-tempo producer, this is a situation you get put in a lot. And I try and talk. There's a lot of down-tempo producers that I've seen at some point in their career will actually change path because they feel this pressure to always be playing bangers. And I totally understand, you get put in these weird slots where you're in between two huge DJs or something. And I've paid my dues opening for Bassnectar and stuff and realized what that means. It's like, it's not always easy. And you feel this kind of pressure to be like, no, play bangers. Like,
well, it's got to be challenging, especially when you're playing your music and there's this lingering pressure to give them what they want, as opposed to like where you're at as an artist and what you want to present and what you want to do and what fulfills your heart. There's that pitfall of pandering. Not that I'm saying you're doing that, but I know that it's sort of hanging in the air that it's like, I'm hired to do this job. I'm in this particular slot, and there are standards that maybe people are looking for in the DJ world.
I totally agree. And that's, I think about somebody like Sade. Like, would anyone tell Sade, hey, you got to play a faster set tonight? It's just like, it's not going to happen because that people expect and appreciate and are there for her music. However, a lot of times people aren't there for your music. They're there for the party. And oftentimes the people who have the loudest voices can be the most kind of high energy, maybe slightly obnoxious people. They're going to be the ones up in your face begging you to play a banger. Whereas the people who are chill and actually maybe like your biggest fans are more in the back because they're overwhelmed by all the people up front just screaming their heads off. So I think I always try to remember that and tell people that too. It's like a successful down-tempo show people are not jumping around and screaming. They're actually like chilling. It's like they're in their heart. They're feeling the music rather than expressing it in a way that they would for a more bass oriented show, which is oftentimes hands in the air and screaming. So you can't judge, I guess, the success of your show or what you're doing, or if you're on the right path, just by simply looking at the audience and seeing, are they going off right now? Like they were going off for the last guy. Why aren't they jumping around for me? Stay true to what you do. And yes, I am guilty of pandering. Like you said, there's been points in my career where I have definitely pandered because I wanted something different than just the pure expression of my music. And that feeling, it just doesn't last. It doesn't feel good in the long run.
Where's that line for you? I mean, you've been in the game for a bit. I mean, you've probably learned some personal lessons there that maybe other people could pick up on about, doing it as a business, doing it as a career, and then also trying to create something. I mean, usually when you're trying to stay true to your own work, what's exciting for you, it's probably like artistically interesting to other people too. But I hear that there's a balance with, you get a lane, you get a career, and then what do you do when people sort of expect something from you?
It can be a tough balance, especially in the beginning of when you're trying to get your name out there, and it can be difficult at times. And but you can't make everyone happy, and you can try, but it's never going to work. I think that creating your own sound, and like you said, like creating something that you would buy, creating something that you enjoy, creating music that you actually really want to listen to when no one else is around. And if you can do that and not making it for kind of the general public and just because you think other people will like it, if you could actually create something that you're kind of like, I want to listen to that song in my headphones right now and go take a walk. Like if you're creating that kind of music, other people will feel the same way. And you got to be prepared for your haters, and that's just part of being an artist. And sometimes you have to have a thick skin in order to deal with the criticisms that come with that. Because no matter what you do, you're going to have people, especially as you gain popularity. There's kind of it just kind of comes with the territory that you're going to have the people that do not like your music, and
it's a sign of success.
Yeah. And like one of my favorite moments was when I was on tour with Shpongle, and there was, it was one of those situations where most of the people there obviously to see Shpongle, and I would say that for the most part things weren't great for me. And my friend brought a friend, and he was like, he's like, didn't like my set, and I was like, well, why didn't he like it? And he said it makes him think too much. And I was like, if all the like criticisms, like that's actually makes sense to me. Like if that, like I want people to think. And if it was kind of like a double-edged sword, I was like, that's in a way it's a criticism, but it helps me understand that it's just like, it's not for everybody, and that's okay.
Do you do anything to insulate yourself from I'll just say the internet criticism, or that's like social media, YouTube comments, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a really tough territory. I've gotten better at handling criticism within myself. However, sometimes you'll read that one random comment. And I'd say I'm pretty lucky, actually. I don't get a lot of haters, but occasionally I'll get some pretty passionate ones. I had one guy write on one of my, I think it was like Last FM or MySpace or something. It was a long time ago. And he wrote like a 3-page doctrine on why he hated my music. And
it was so fascinating why they care so much.
Yeah, I know. And it was so detailed and so specific, and he just ripped me to shreds. And like, I was just devastated. And then and like you said, I thought about it. I'm like, if this guy cares so much about saying this, that he would write all this stuff, then I'm actually doing something that is powerful. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but at least I know I'm affecting people. The worst thing is just no reaction at all, where it's just like,
if your art isn't pissing somebody off, it's not very good art.
Yeah.
Like mediocrity would be the kiss of death.
Absolutely.
Really. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. What do you, this is something I think about, but I'm not fully in the world, so I never really know the answer to it. But what is your opinion, or what are the differences between people who are producers and DJs who they perform all their own music versus none of their own music versus a combination. And I'm speaking about essentially DJ sets, you know. And they all get kind of lumped together into the same thing. But to me, there's a dramatic difference in what is going on.
I totally agree. And I think that there's an underappreciation for that divide because it can be pretty... So the art of DJing, like being a proper DJ, is actually incredibly challenging and also super powerful, because when you're a DJ and you're about to get on stage, you have access to every song ever written. And if you don't crush it, then you're missing something. Like if you can't make all that work into something coherent, it's really hard to do that, basically, and to constantly change it up because you have access to everything. And there's so much good music. And I think a really good DJ, if you're just talking strictly dance party stuff, I mean, there's nothing like it. I think it's one of the most incredible art forms. And it's not something I'm very good at because I don't have time to look around for all the different new songs. And I like to do it sometimes. And then, yeah, as a producer, you're looking at your library and you have, I mean, how many songs do producers have? I mean, I have, a few hundred or whatever they can actually choose from. And so my options are really limited. And so that limitation is actually what is your sound, though. So that needs to be embraced. I think where it gets kind of shady, I think, is when you have a producer up there who's producing and then they kind of throw in not even a remix. It sounds just like their music. Or sometimes you'll have these producers that are imitating their idol, like Tipper or something. And so they sound just like that person. And then they'll actually play some of their songs and kind of sneak it in.
That's weird. Yeah, I think that's really weird. I mean, where are the ethics in this stuff? There's no code of conduct. I mean,
and I think
it's not like just comics stealing a joke. It's sort of like most of the audience doesn't even know.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's fucked up. And I think that people really need to check in with themselves and see what they're really doing. I think that people are afraid. These producers are afraid that they're going to not be able to play a great set or play music that everyone's going to like, and so they fall back on. And I've seen pretty major producers do this exact thing, and they kind of sneak it in. And it's just, and if you're not doing anything to the song and you're not announcing it and you're not, sometimes I'll get a new track from somebody and I'll make an announcement like, this is my friends just made this track and I really want to play it, so here it is. And that's, in my mind, that seems to be more honoring the artist. But when they're sneaking it in, that's fucked up, and people need to stop doing that. Like, just need to stop. It's like,
I mean, I feel like if it would be easier to just DJ and play other people's music. But I mean, it seems like, for instance, for you, you're making a choice to produce music and then play that in your set. And is that just because that's what you enjoy, or you want a particular kind of music that you don't hear, or for some other reason, that you want to do that? Or are you doing both?
Well, I think, I mean, the why is just that there's a desire there to just create and to share it. And when you do play a set of 100% your own material, it feels so good. Because when I first got started, I actually would kind of do exactly what we were talking about. So I guess I'm guilty of it when I was, maybe like 21 or something. And people would respond to the one song that I wasn't mine the most. And they come up to me and go, dude, that song, what's it called? And I'm like, fuck, that's the one song I didn't write. And it felt so dirty. Right. And so I made a choice at that point. I only did this a couple times, and I made a choice. Like, I'm never going to do that again. I only want to play my own tracks, or potentially a remix, like a closey remix or something that's of one of my tracks, that kind of thing. And it just feels so good to just say, this is all my good and bad. This is all me. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're just kind of like standing there, like pressing buttons, literally. Like you're
that's
not
what I think.
Contributing.
Yeah, that's why I'm confused sometimes. How there's such a divide between the two.
Yes,
it really is. It really is. I mean, one's like presenting music you've labored over and created, versus one is you're sort of someone's representative. And like, well, I'll put it together. I'm going to package it, which is an art form, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah, and I think that it's like people need to ask themselves, why are they doing it? Why are they performing at all? Is it because they want to get laid? or because they want to be cool? Or is it because
the ego?
Or is it because they love music? And if you don't love music, you're in the wrong business. If you don't truly love and if you would do it by yourself, even if no one was watching, that's the difference. And I think a lot of people get into it for egoic reasons and to be
I was talking to Christian Doss on the podcast, and we were talking similar thing, and he's like, I make music because I have to. It's like, duh. It's like, I have to do this or I'll go nuts. And I'm like, I get that. It's not doing it because he's trying to make cash or
excuse me,
for any of these sorts of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been involved in the consciousness festival scene since probably the beginning of it. And I'm curious where you see this whole thing going, or how you feel about it. Obviously, I have feelings about it.
Yeah. I feel like I've been a part of it, like pretty much from what I consider the beginning. It's been just such an amazing journey watching this scene just grow and grow and grow and become something that I just never could have imagined. And it's, as I tour around the country and the world, I see it expanding more and more and more everywhere. I mean, I was just down in Australia at Rainbow Serpent, and I was like, this is exactly the same thing that we do in the States. It's same archetypal thing. And it's totally incredible to be a part of it. And the people in this scene are just fucking awesome. And so many smart, intelligent people, super creative, spiritually aligned. But yeah, there's a dark side to everything. And I think it comes with just the situation of the world that we live in right now is pretty fucked up. And I think there's a lot of people are lost. And I think this scene helps people find themselves, but I think also if you're not careful, can further the lostness. So it's a part of life. It's not a utopic vision. I don't think there may be something that comes out of it that helps the world be a better place. But
which ones are you kind of jamming on lately?
Which you feel are
successful. You feel that they're
I
nice.
mean, I love the symbiosis events, like Eclipse, and also just the normal symbiosis festivals. Those are probably, like, as far as like that type of festival, my favorite. Envision's great. I mean, but nothing compares to Burning Man, in my opinion. I mean, I think that's almost not even a festival. It's something completely different, but that takes the cake as my favorite by far.
Yeah. That one's sort of its own beast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This year will be my 21st in a row, so I guess I'm a
cow
old school burner.
They give you the keys to the city.
Yeah. But I still have to buy a ticket, damn it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's awesome, man. So let's talk music a little bit. I always like to get under the hood a little bit. And when you were making this new record, what kind of tools were you using? Tell me a little bit about how you do make your music.
So I'm in my studio right now. I have my iMac is sort of the heart of my system, and I have one of my favorite. I got the Manley Veramu compressor. I'm using an Apollo 8 as my sound card, going into a Dangerous Music D-Box to do analog summing.
You know those D-Boxes, they came out with the new one, and so the originals now you can get them pretty affordably on Reverb.com and stuff. And I'm going to pick one up, I think, as a monitor controller and summing. You like it?
It's changed everything. And it was one of those things that I had never heard before. I'd only seen stuff on the internet about it. So I kind of just had to take people's word for it, because you can't really hear the difference on that like on YouTube. So I was a little nervous when I got it. And what's cool about it is when you take the digital output of the UAD and go into the DA converter on the D-Box, the difference is astounding. Like, I was blown away. It felt like I could actually turn my speakers down because they were so much more clear. And there's just kind of this clarity just with the converter in it, and that's not even using the main features of the instrument, which are analog summing. And the analog summing thing is something that I had been doing on a mixer, our console for a while, but it was so hard to recall my settings because if I had moved one fader or just getting the panning right, everything was just very touchy. But with this, it's all instantly recallable and super rock solid. And it opens up the music in a way that I was not expecting. And I can never go back. I mean, that is the icing on the cake. And I bounce everything down to 8 channels. And sometimes we'll do summing. I'll sum my drums first and that kind of thing. And then I go through that into the Varimu compressor and then record that. And that's my final mix. Mm-hmm. And that just, to me, that's how you get everything super buttery and spacious. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend that to anyone who wants to take their music production to the next level and really have a super professional sound. I mean, you don't need it, but if you want it, it's worth it.
Is that also your monitor controller?
I have a PreSonus monitor station that I use for my monitors, which I find to be pretty transparent, and it's just it's a little bit easier to change. Well, I have used the D-Box in that way, but the way my studio is set up, so I have 2 rooms and I have speakers in a different room as well. And it's just easier for me to go back and forth between the different rooms with all the different buttons, I find, rather than using the D-Box as my main monitor controller.
What do you mean you have 2 rooms, but you're using one monitor controller?
Yeah. So I have the room I'm in now is my main studio room, and it's all soundproofed and whatnot. And then there's another room, which is kind of like a more warehousey space where I can set up a drum kit, or if I have like a lot of people, it's a live room. Yeah. Yeah. And then I have a whole separate sound system in there and also like a box where I can plug in all my XLRs and stuff, and that comes back into this room, so I can do a whole different setup in there. So I just find it easier to manage that. Plus, the PreSonus has 4 headphones out and just a couple other features that just make it easier for me.
Are you worried about leaving all this when you're on the road, or is this has been your rhythm for a while, kind of going in and out, and this is your home base for that?
You mean worried about it, like?
Creating. You're just saying in the van life, you're going to spend maybe a little more time doing that. And it's just something I face too sometimes, because, I'm using all my critical mixing and finishing of stuff is down. Currently, I do it down at the studio in Boulder, Utah, but I'm not there all the time. And it's far away. It's not exactly a convenient spot. So
it's yes, it is a huge caveat to this lifestyle, and I kind of hate it in that way, because I really could spend every day in my studio working on tunes. It's just, but the reality is, as a performing artist, you have to get out there and play shows. There's no other way to really make money. You
also get better. I mean, for better or worse, it makes you improve in a lot of ways. It forces me to rehearse. It forces me to try things. You learn a lot by performing too.
Yeah, and I think also the excitement builds when you're away from the studio. I can get kind of down and depressed if I spend too much time smoking weed and sitting around my studio, like kind of doing nothing. Yeah. I get kind of like in my head and sort of isolated. Yeah. When I come back off the road, I'm really inspired. So I'm like, oh yeah, my drum machines, my little toys.
I got a piece of gear for you to check out. Have you ever checked out the Burl B2 Bomber?
No.
That might be even next level for as your
what is
main. It's Burl, Burl, the B2.
And what does it do?
It's a converter, but it has this magic knob on the left that's like the input gain in a sense. And so it's sort of like, the Dangerous Bus 2 has like those 3 knobs that sort of adding levels of saturation and stuff like that, like magic sauce. It basically does that. Like you can do a little bit, which is super clean, or you can just drive it super hard to get sort of like a Pretty Lights type sound or something. And it's supposedly, from what people tell me, it's just like, it's just sort of a rarefied thing. It's just in the way that the D-Box was like, ooh, that was a really wonderful boost. You can use this after or before your compressor, for instance, as your final output. And you could also use it on tracking. You can use it as you're inputting things in as a converter. Yeah.
Well, I love that kind of stuff. I would say my Swiss Army knife, probably one of my most used pieces of gear is the Electron Analog Heat. I've found that to be one of the most amazing pieces of equipment ever made. You know, it has it's kind of advertised as a distortion unit, but it's got it's all analog, 8 different circuits that you can run your music through and drive it in different ways. And for like drums or for any instrument, really, you can turn. What I love about it too is you can take a soft synth, take like a Serum, put it through this, distort it just a little bit, engage the analog filters in EQ and some of the LFOs, and you have basically a brand new analog synth that you've never owned before. It really it changes the sound so much, and it's such a warm sound. And as you move the knob up, the circuits get more and more kind of intensely distorted. And I've actually mastered with it. I mastered the song Eulogy off my last album on it as a kind of like what you just said, just to saturate the whole song.
Really?
Yeah. I saturated
What's
my vocals.
Called?
It's called the Electron Analog Heat.
Okay.
And Electron is like probably one of my favorite companies is as far as the gear they produce is just so top notch and great form factor. Everything sounds so good. And there's also the way that they've integrated the new, it's called Overbridge. It's the kind of, it basically turns everything into a VST instrument, but it's so it operates as a plugin inside of Ableton or whatever soft DAW you're using. And so it's very user-friendly in that way, and also responds to a lot of their stuff responds to CV or generates CV. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do when if you're into modular stuff. I have their Analog Heat, which like I said is probably my favorite piece of gear, and then I have the Digitact drum machine, which I also really love, and the Electron Analog 4. So those 3 Electron gear, I mean, you could do anything with those.
And you're using Ableton mostly as your DAW?
Yes. I used Logic for a long time, but at this point, 100% Ableton, except for the occasional experimental stuff with other pieces.
And what's your situation as far as favorite high plugins versus this analog gear that you're using?
Yeah, I feel like I have like kind of a plugin addiction where I'll get into one plugin for a while and then just
I'm sure your computer loves that. Start piling them up.
And then I'll move on to something else. And so I'm really into the kind of like, I've discovered the adaptive verb is a cool, the synaptic adaptive verb is really super sick reverb unit that actually gives you the ability to control the intonation of it resynthesizes it before it goes into the reverb. And then you can control the kind of intonation of the reverb as it moves through the music. So it creates a really interesting way to create very big, lush layers without conflicting as you change chords, I guess, would be the best way to describe it.
It's like a dynamic reverb kind of.
Yeah, it's a resynthesized, a reverb resynthesis, which I think is kind of the future of reverb. Because reverb is one of the most awesome effects ever, but it has its limitations. And I like being able to go even deeper with it. I have this other Synaptic plugin called Morph, which is really fun. It's sort of like a vocoder, but a much more advanced vocoder. A lot of times it's used in movies to create voices for like Marvel characters and that kind of thing, where if they wanted to have like Rockman, and so they would take the sound of rocks and mix it with a voice. And so then the voice sounds like it's made of rocks. And so that's a very common use of it, that kind of thing, or birds or anything. But you can obviously morph your voice or different pieces of music and completely change the character of whatever instrument you're playing. So that's a super fun one. I've definitely had fun experimenting with that one.
Wow.
And the new Ableton 10 is just so crazy. There's so many built-in effects that are just, with the Max stuff, blowing my mind. I feel like I'm always finding one new Max plugin that I didn't know existed, and love all that stuff. That's one of the reasons I think Ableton is so great, because it's pretty much all you need. You don't need all these other plugins if you're just getting started.
Are you using Max and Ableton to work with your lighting, or is your girlfriend kind of doing it live?
So she helps set it up, but I'm controlling everything, and I'm using, it's called DMXis, and it's basically a USB to DMX converter box that runs as a VST inside of Ableton, and you operate it just like you would a soft synth. So you assign your knobs to different MIDI control messages. And so the way I use it is I build all these different MIDI clips, and each MIDI clip controls one light. I'm not using RGB, but you could certainly set it up like that, where you have, red on one channel and all the other different colors on different channels. And so you build an array of MIDI clips, and then I just press a button and it launches in time with the music. And it's a great way to have a super simple but extremely complex and synchronized lighting show. So it's been it's super dependable and works really well, very easy to set up. And I can also make lighting patches on the fly, or you can assign, like, let's say you have a cutoff knob on your synth and you want it, every time you turn it, you want the red light to come on. You can do that. You can do, there's just a million ways you can use it that are even more in depth than I use it.
It's pretty stable.
It's very stable. I've never had the only trouble I've ever had with it is if the USB, actual physical stuff like the cable or something like that.
How much stuff are you traveling with for your shows?
Quite a bit, but it's mostly light stuff, honestly. My old setup was...
That's why you drive, I guess, more?
Yeah.
Do you have to plan out, like, all right, I'm going to do the East Coast, this chunk? Because otherwise you have to bounce in and out too many times. Yeah,
I mean, I do a lot of flying gigs too, and that's much more simple. When I fly, I just bring my guitar, my laptop, a couple effects, a synth, that kind of thing. When I do for my other shows, I have like my own tables and all my lights, and I have like 20 some lights, and they're giant Edison bulbs, so they're quite they take up a lot of space. So I definitely fill up my van with gear. And I like to, if I am going to go on the road, I just want to bring as much stuff as I can. I mean, as long as it's realistic to set it up in an hour or so, then I'm going to do it because it's more fun. So it's like, I don't want to be lazy, on the road, especially.
Yeah. Sweet, man. Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to just ask you a little bit more about process and like, sometimes I could geek out on gear all day, and it's really interesting for me. That was a nice deep dive. But for you, what is the creative process like, and what are some of the pitfalls you found that you've workarounds? Like for me, for instance, I know it's a game of repetition. I like to work in the sort of like the late morning and stuff. Otherwise, it's sort of a monkey on my back, and I'm sort of like building little bricks, as opposed to big stints or inspiration moments like that. What's it like for you?
Well, I'm more of a night owl, honestly. I feel like I have my creative windows, which are early in the morning or late at night, and middle of the day is hard for me because I feel like there's just too many distractions with emails and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Podcast
and just knowing that the world is awake out there, operating, and I'm in my studio by myself, just being weird. I find that a lot of the time, David Lynch had a really awesome I'm trying to remember the name of his book that he wrote, but it was on transcendental meditation. And I don't do a lot of transcendental meditation, but there were some good lessons in that book nonetheless. And one of his things is like, it's like when you start the creative process, you just have to catch a small fish, and it may not be all that inspiring, but as you put that fish on a lure, you throw it back in the water, you catch a bigger fish and a bigger fish until eventually you catch the big fish. And I think that one of the lessons I've learned doing this is that it's not about waiting for me to feel creative, because I don't often feel creative. I'll come in, I'll be like, I'm just here, but I just force myself to get started on something and to allow myself to just continue to work, whether or not I'm inspired. And then eventually you just stumble across a sound or something or a beat or whatever it is. And you're like, man, that's fucking cool. I think I'm going to work on that. And a lot of times when I get to that point, I will not work. Once I find that sort of thing I can sink my teeth into, I'll maybe take a break, go get some dinner, make sure that I have several hours that I can really dive into it instead of just dinking around and making it worse. And then I'll come back and just charge through and try and do as much as I can in one session where the song is nearly complete. And then after that is where I do all the more technical stuff where it can take weeks or months. But I think to take that opportunity to really seize on that first drop of inspiration, to do as much as you can with it in that moment, is for me is the method that I use to continue to be productive. And I think also really work on the art of finishing and trying to treat that as a craft. So that helps you be prolific, because if you don't finish things, then you just kind of have this library of stuff that doesn't have any, it's just noise basically. And even if you're like, don't think that the song is done, rather than just moving on to the next thing, finish it. And whether or not it's the final version, it doesn't matter. I think it's just good to really try to finish things if it's worth it. If it's good enough, not if it's total shit, but and then oftentimes you'll come back a month later and listen to that thing that you thought wasn't that great. You're like, actually, that was fucking awesome. I should really work on that again. So
yeah.
That's been kind of my philosophy, is to be prolific and to just continue to work and do it. Just always create time and space to actually work.
Yeah, there was an author, I don't know who it was, who someone asked him how he finds inspiration. And he says, I find it at 10 o'clock when I sit down to write. It's like, you just start and you let it form. And some days it forms stronger than others, but your job is just to sit down and do the work.
Yeah. And I think that's so true. And the thing about what's great about music is that is what the inspiration is. And without creating it, you're never going to know. So nothing happens, you may have a dream of a song, but really until you hear it, that's when if it sounds interesting and you want to continue to work on it, that should be your first point of inspiration.
So, and where do you kind of see this going? Have you had any insights being out on the road and being in the music industry? It is such a dynamic thing with streaming and AI. Where do you personally predict the short-term and long-term outlook for music as something in our lives and as a profession?
Well, sure. Well, I think there's two sides to that coin. I think as a profession, yet to be seen, I don't really understand. Oh,
that sounds like something fell over.
That was really strange. One of my instruments just decided to jump off its stand.
It's a message. It's a message. That's the future of music.
So bizarre. Okay, where was it? Oh yeah. So as far as the music business goes, we're in some big, serious growing pains right now. I can attest to that like the only way to really make a living doing this for 90% of music artists is to perform constantly. I make a little bit money on Spotify and all that kind of stuff, but it's not like what it used to be, where you would perform shows to promote your album and that's where you made all your money. Now it's the complete opposite. So it can be a little bit daunting to imagine myself doing this in 15, 20 years. I don't even know if I'll be able to do that. So I'm hoping that some geniuses out there figure out a way to bring this huge music industry right now, where there's so much amazing music, bring the money back to the artists. And I feel like people are getting really ripped off by these large companies that aren't paying artists fairly and haven't. And I think it's also, it's not completely their fault, because I just don't think that people have figured out what the best system is. So yet to be seen. I hope that things come around in that way for artists of the future. I do, however, think that the music itself, the direction of music, we have just scratched the surface of what's going to be possible with AI and this computer technology. Just to see the way that music has changed, the accessibility to music in the last 10, 15, 20 years because of computers. And as AI takes hold, we're going to be creating music that I think is going to be much more connected to the chemistry of our brains, and using AI to create customized music for yourself or for others that really taps into a deeper level. So I have great hope that in 50 years, I don't even think we would recognize the music that it's going to come out of this time as things develop, but it's going to be incredibly beautiful.
I do think, I've thought the same thing about a customized AI. Like, you'll have your own AI artist in a sense, or you'll be fans of AIs, but it'll be for you. Like, your entire library would just be unique to you, and it could be written in 1 second. It can change every day, and it's based on perhaps your physiobiology in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah, that definitely will happen. And
it's getting taste of it now, like just the AI that we're already using. And I use AI for some of my mixes and stuff, just to kind of get a sense of what AI says I should do. And it's pretty powerful stuff. I have to admit that we're just getting started with it, but I think that the one thing that's missing from AI is self-deprecation. And I think that once AI learns how to be depressed and be creative in that way, then I think it'll be awesome.
The tortured AI artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, because it wants to be human. I think live shows, like that human element of seeing something live, will probably become more valuable, actually, because it'll be unique. And that in itself will be, people as they are now will be more and more hungry for the human connection.
I agree. There will always be space for that. And I think that too, I don't think AI is going to be in charge of the music. I think that AI is just going to be another tool that the real artists will be able to use effectively.
Yeah. I was doing this project. It actually starts next week, I think, but it's Google's creating a neuroaesthetics sort of design project where they're exploring how design influences your biology. And so that includes music and the design itself, everything that is the space. And so you go into these different spaces and they give you this wearable tech that's just getting data about your body's response, your emotional response, your heart rate, things like that. And then afterwards, you can see which one your body's responding to. And I think it's sort of an early sign or an early stage of this like biofeedback. And that's what the whole idea of neuroaesthetics is like how your neurology is working with aesthetics. And so the same thing can be true with music. So it's happening.
Simultaneously awesome and creepy, but I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Cool. Well, let's end this. I was curious what music you're jamming on, or what kind of artists you like. What do you like to just actually listen to, as opposed to the ones that make us sound like cool music?
Yeah. I'm always hungry for new stuff, and I just found this amazing album by I wish I could remember the lead singer's name. I believe he just died, is how I learned about this, but it's Talk the band, and they have an album from 1988 called Spirit of Eden. And I heard about it from on a different podcast, and they were just talking about the album, and I went and checked it out on my drive back from New York, and it just blew my mind. I can't believe I had never heard this album, and it's interesting as it's from the 80s, and there's definitely, especially in the vocals, there's like, oh yeah, this is 80s, but it's nothing like anything I've ever heard from the 80s. It's a much more psychedelic.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've heard this album, Spirit of Eden, but that has been on my rotation.
It sounds familiar, and I feel like someone mentioned this to me, but I basically have not gone deep. So I'd like to.
I think it's worth going deep, and there's really nothing like it. I'd be interested to hear your take on it if you check it out sometime. Cool, and so that's what I'm listening to. And but yeah, right now I'm just getting ready for my first Red Rocks show. So I'm going to stop listening to other people's music and prepare.
Congrats!
Yeah,
wonderful.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah. When is that? Well, speaking of, what do you got coming up that you want to mention? What are you excited about, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so that's my main thing. I'm getting pretty pumped for May 11th at Red Rocks, my first Red Rocks show, playing there with Papadozio and Polish Ambassador. And I'm also debuting the first iteration of my live band called the Penumbra. So it's I've got Ilya from Emancipator, as well as Colby, the drummer, and this guy Glenn on pedal steel guitar, and a couple other guest artists, including David Peter Mellish and some dancers.
That's a big
and stuff.
show, man. Nice.
Yeah, so we're going all in. We're going to try and do something we've never done before. So I'm super pumped about that. And of course, we're going to film the whole thing and hopefully make it something that other people can enjoy for a long time if things don't fall apart. And beyond that, the bunch of festivals, Electric Forest and Elements Festival, there's a few, a bunch of other festivals, and I have some big announcements for the fall coming up soon. And of course, people can go on my website and find out where I'm playing if they want to find out more about that. But yeah, lots of good stuff coming up in the future. So,
and they can find you at randomrab.tv or what is the
yeah. randomrab.com. I haven't bought TV, so please don't anyone else poach that. Just Google it.
Dig it. Well, I'll put it in the show notes to your site. I appreciate your time, and we'll catch up again another time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thanks, bud. Okay, thanks, Random Rab. That was fun. It was really fun to get to know him, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I'll see you on the road, hitting the road, going to the Northeast. See you in Pennsylvania, or New Jersey, or New York City, or Massachusetts, or upstate New York, or Chicago. So eastforest.org is where you can see all those dates and everything else good coming up. Happy birthday to Ram Das, our 88-year-old master elder out there. Keep sharing your stories about that. This song that you were hearing in the background is called Lives to Live, and it's Random Rabs from his new album. So you can check out his new album, I'm sure, anywhere you listen to music, and I'll put a link in the show notes to his website, which has all the links to his socials and all that kind of good jazz. Thanks for giving this podcast a review. Thanks for being a good person. Thanks for putting good vibrations out there. Thank you for sitting today, maybe for 5 minutes, and just breathing. I have a feeling intuitively it will help somehow, some way, somebody. May the forest be with you. Keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, you gotta do it with grace, folks. Do it with grace.